Hello, good morning, and welcome to the Dailies on Equa Television, where we keep you updated with some of the events and happening on the front page of the Nigerian newspaper. So please do well to be part of the program by dropping your comment, your views, your recommendation regarding any of this event that is of interest to you. I am Sele Elisha. I'll be doing this program alongside Rachel. Good morning.
Morning, Sally.
All right, we shall be running through the papers, starting with New Telegraph newspaper.
On New Telegraph, the first story is on PMS, improves local refining, cuts importation by 68% to 119 million liters. Customs grants 1.6 trillion naira worth of waivers to boost economy. This is a 2024 report. You can find details on page 25. Reps may recommend scrapping of agencies. This is concerning budget. 9 oil princes fault over day's appointment as Alafin. Lagos Assembly, why Obasa was sacked by Fuad Oki. You can find details on page 2 and 28. Trump would have been convicted if not elected. This is a report. You can find details on page 6. The big story on the paper is on insecurity. Simon Epa's arrest in Finland reduced tension in the southeast coming from the CDS. The writer says Anambra kidnapped victims to expose abductors' dens as police begin operations. Tinubu assures nation will overcome security challenges. Defense Ministry demands 20 billion naira for deceased personnel families. We must support security agencies, a statement from Abbas. You can find details of the big story on page 237 and 30. Still on New Telegraph, AGF Fabemi confirms return of $110 million stolen assets. CBN fines 9 banks 150 million naira each for failing to dispense cash via ATMs during the Yuletide. I mean, we had those situations here, even on the plateau, where the ATMs were not dispensing, and we have the POS agents cashing out on Nigerians when we should have money at the ATM. You can find details on page 3. On food security, federal government deploys tech to enhance food production. End farmer headers crisis, National Assembly tax livestock minister. We have a study that says gum disease impairs brain function. Of course, I think anything that has to do with our oral health also affect other organs. It could also be the heart, and now we are seeing that gum disease impairs brain function. So I think we should take our oral health seriously, as we can see it affects other organs and vital organs of the body. You can find details on page 27. We have a picture story where we can see President Bola Ahmed Tinubu alongside other presidents that of Mauritania and others, and that's all the news on New Telegraph newspaper.
On the Nation newspaper, dispute with General Hydrocarbons, we didn't abuse court process, says First Bank Nigeria. More detail of this story can be found on the front page and then continue on page 4. I have no hand in speaker's removal, says Sanwo-Olu. You can read more detail regarding that. National Assembly to block funding for NAMASA, MPA, FRS, and others. 390 stranded Nigerians evacuated from Niger Republic, and then we have Senate decries 11.8 billion naira take off funds for livestock ministry. More detail found on page 25. My government working hard to end insecurity, says Tinubu. The writer following that story, we will invest in technology to fight terror, says the president. And then Matawadi here saying 50 billion naira budget for defense ministry is inadequate. You can find more detail of that story in the paper. Regarding food security, government to recapitalize Bank of Agric, more detail found on page 2. 21-year jail for Randy Arabic teacher. Rivalry families kick over Alife's choice. You can read detail of that on page 6. We have 2 picture stories on the front page. Please do well to get the paper in more detail of stories of interest.
On First News newspaper, Tinubu is his own cabal undermining Bajabiamila and others, a statement from Showumi. Fuel subsidy removal blessing for states, a statement from Governor Uzodinma. Serap to Tinubu, stop police harassment of Amnesty International. 4,000 trapped, 100 plus dead in South Africa's abandoned gold mine. Simon Ekpa's arrest eased tension in the south is the report from the CDS. The big story on the paper, Oyo Royals rebel. Atiba 9 reject Owade's Alafin appointment, call it sacrilege. Lawmakers question 11.8 billion naira budget for livestock development ministry. Rights violation of scavengers and traders, lawyer sues Wike. 390 stranded Nigerians repatriated from Niger Republic. And we have a picture story which was on most of our papers yesterday, and still today we are seeing President Bola Tinubu and Rwandan counterpart Paul Kagame walk in stride towards a pivotal discussion at the Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week, emphasizing Africa's potential for growth through unity and collaboration. And that's all the news on First News newspaper.
On Daily Independent newspaper, the big story, recapitalization, Wema, Polaris, Keystone Banks shopping for merger acquisition. Where we have the writer here is saying CBN sanctioned 9 banks for failing to dispense cash via ATMs. TCN needs 2.779 trillion naira to execute 149 projects. This is coming from the Power Minister. You can do well read that on page 7. ASU restates rejection of state reform bill, state fund scrapping. Says the bill seeks to kill Nigerian public tertiary education. We saw that even yesterday on our paper. National Assembly laments 11.8 billion naira budget for livestock ministry. Trudeau urges minister to use the ministry to resolve the farmers' headers crisis. APC planning to stop PDP from contesting national election. You can find who said that and more on page 6. I'm not favorable in spending JAM registrar, replies National Assembly. I'm not favorable in spending JAM registrar, replies National Assembly, says the new minimum wage jack up salaries. We will recall yesterday we saw where the ministry is actually trying to exempt JAM from actually getting any budget for this year. So here we're seeing a reply coming from the registrar regarding spending. You can read more detail of that on page 6. Simon Ekpa's arrest has reduced tension in Southeast, coming from the Chief of Defense Staff. Federal government confirms return of over $110 million in recovered asset abroad. The writer here reiterates commitment to crash food prices, takes delivery of 255 tractors out of 2,000. More detail found in the paper. We have Bafarawa resigned from PDP, states his reason. You can read detail of that on page 29, and that's all on Daily Independent newspaper.
The Daily Times newspaper, the big story 2025 budget. Reps federal government disagrees over 286 million naira foreign mission expenses. TED Fund suspends scholarship for academic staff. You can start with the details on the front page. Tinubu appoints Fola Shade Adekenyojo as first deputy DG DSS. EPA's arrest has reduced chaos in the southeast. Wike signs 5,481 C of O in 1 year. Professor Moti is Union Abuja Director of the Leadership Center. The last story on the paper, Nigeria will overcome insecurity, an assurance from President Tinubu, and that's all the news on the Daily Times newspaper.
On the Metric newspaper, MTATM, CBN slapped 1.35 billion naira fine on 9 banks for non-compliance. More detail of that story can be found in the paper. CAF postponed chat to August 2025 draws to be held today. That is for sport lovers. You can read that story on page 22. NPA, Namasa, others risks funding withdrawal. The writer here says furious National Assembly issued them 48-hour ultimatum to appear for 2025 budget defense. We'll see that ministries have been coming in an agency to defend their budget as well as what they actually brought in from 2024. Oyo AG reveals why ex-Oni wife Hamza Fasia were dragged to court over Sampi. We saw that story dragging from last year till date. More detail found on page 9. Regarding insecurity, which is the big story, it requires collective effort, says Tinubu. The writer following that urges security agents to remain courageous and patriotic. Matawale bemoans 50 billion naira budget for defense ministry. Simon Ekpa's arrest eases Southeast insecurity coming from the chief of defense staff. Federal government repatriating 390 Nigerian migrants from Niger Republic. And we have Sanwo-Olu not involved in Obasa impeachment coming from the spokesman. Sorodu achievement in Anambra land him Sunman of the Year award. You can read detail of that story on page 8. We have this picture story during the opening ceremony and sustainability prize award ceremony that held recently. You can do well to get the paper. And we have an entertainment story on page 23, which I feel you should read through if you are interested. And that's all on the Metric newspaper.
On the Guardian newspaper, First Bank Nigerian Holding is saying we demanded transparency from General Hydrocarbons. CBN fines 9 banks 1.35 billion naira for not dispensing cash via ATMs. Reps panel falls 286 million naira allocations to 109 foreign missions. Investors lose 1.1 trillion naira from sell-off in 41 stocks. The big story on the paper, Armed Forces Remembrance Day, better equipment, compensation, persecution of terrorists top agenda. You can find details on page 6. 50 billion naira budget can't end insecurity, Matawale tells lawmakers. Police strengthen litigation, demand apology from Amnesty International. Obedient movement factions exist won't affect LP, says party chief. Obedient movement factions exit won't affect LP, says party chief. ASU opposes diversion of TET funds resources as reps push tax reforms. Seaport rehabilitation orders missing from 38.3 billion naira, and that's all the news on the Guardian newspaper.
I love the big story, Rachel, regarding Remembrance Day for Armed Forces and the fact that better equipment, compensation, and persecution of our terrorists is one of the top agendas. We cannot overemphasize the importance of actually the well-being first and foremost of our security agency, because imagine if they are comfortable and they have all that is needed, knowing the fact that their loved ones as well are comfortable, you see that they give their best because you know that they are very, very comfortable. And I think this is a unit or a body that shouldn't be played with whatsoever reason. Am I saying that other civil servants are not important? Of course not. But when we are talking about our military men, especially that are out there in the field, I believe that their well-being should be the top priority. Secondly, we are looking at better equipment. And yesterday, you will recall when we're looking at the chief of defense staff complaining about the fact that terrorists are getting funding from international bodies and foreign people as well. And I recall saying the fact that this is where it's an eye-opener for the Nigerian government as well to do something regarding the equipment that our soldiers are using. Sometimes you just cannot help but look at it. It looks more like, fighting a bandit with a stick, because that is what we can actually compare the equipment that our army are using comparison to what the terrorists are using, as well as persecution of them, where we're saying that most of the Boko Haram repentants are even children. So you just cannot help but wonder what really is happening. But I'm very happy that this is coming up, and I hope that it doesn't just appear on our paper, but even the body language of our government will show that they are really, really trying to prioritize the well-being of the military, as well as the equipment that is needed for them to be able to tackle terrorism as a whole.
Of course, Sele, equipment is number one. If you look at the gear that our military use right now, we're really backward compared to how certain countries have advanced when it comes to the gear that the military use and all of that. And I just hope that when we invest this time around, we are not waiting for fairly used equipment and all of that, but we will be able to, as a country, have our own first grade, and even go to the extent where certain, gears, kits, and all of that will be designed specifically for us, just for that uniqueness and to have our own signature and all of that, not just for the sake of that, but this is unique to our situation and what our military needs out there in fighting and Boko Haram terrorists and every other terrorists that are out there. And I see compensation here, which of course we are looking at the fallen heroes and their families. But if we are to make a list, if equipment is number one, I think number two should be welfare of the present ones who are out there. It's very important, and then compensation can come in third, because these people that are out there fighting it are the ones that we need to look at for number one. I'm not saying there shouldn't be compensation to the family, but if we're to have a priority list, this is what I'm doing here. If we are to have a priority list after the equipment, second is a welfare for those who are currently serving and are out there. Because we have a lot of corruption and sabotage in the army and in our military in general. And one of the reasons is because, you know what, people are not comfortable with what they have. And when there's an opportunity to make more, not everybody out there is as loyal as we think, or have that ethic that will stop them from being corrupt and all of that. So but when you put them in a position where they have no reason whatsoever, then perhaps we can be tougher and demand more from them. But as it is now, it's almost like they are at the mercy of terrorists, they are at the mercy of the economy, and it's not funny for any other person. But yes, we are looking forward. 2025 has begun, and then we will wait and see if truly this top agenda will be executed properly.
Even though we're seeing Matawadi complaining that the budget is even very low, looking at 50 billion.
If we're to be honest,
yeah, because I always remember you saying that we cannot say that funding for security is too much. It's never too much. So let's look forward to seeing what the House will say regarding. Maybe they might increase the budget that to be allocated to them. Looking at the next paper, which is the Punch newspaper, opposition demands impeach Speaker probe as the GAC meet Lagos Assembly leaders. Opposition demands impeach Speaker's probe as the GAC meet Lagos Assembly leaders. You can read detail of that on page 30. Still, we're looking at the issue in the First Bank of Nigeria. A dispute with the General Hydrocarbons is over transparency, says First Bank of Nigeria. More detail of that story can be found on page 10 and 11. Southwest governors team up against ASWAP elements and bandits. Governors working on intelligence report as the Southwest monarchs demand proactive step. Regarding the other tie season, where we saw that ATMs were not dispensing, CBN fines 9 banks 1.35 billion naira for ATM cash scarcity. Nigeria earned 50 trillion naira from crude oil in 2024. This is a report you can find on page 21. Court hears suit challenging Lagos Calabar highway contract. That story can be in the paper as well. Ogun lovers wanted for allegedly killing Chinese. You can find that story on page 4 and 5. Oni ex-queen, others regain freedom after 21-day remand. More detail on page 14. We still have this picture story where we can see Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala and others. This happened at the convocation ceremony in Abuja on Tuesday, being organized by UBA, and that's all on the Punch newspaper.
On Nigerian Tribune, the big story, National Assembly demands detailed report on Ministry of Livestock Development. The writer says senators reps frown at 11.8 billion naira budget for 2025. Minister told not to restrict projects to cattle alone. White paper on ministry still not out. You can find details on page 3. CBN sanctions 9 banks for failing to dispense cash via ATMs. NERC transfers full electricity regulatory oversight to 4 states. PDP NWC to convene amid controversy over National Secretary position. Ude Okoye expected to attend. You can find details on page 12. Funke Egbemode's column debuts with Madam President's budget. You can find details at the back page. JAMB registrar debunks report on spending 850 million naira on fumigation, says amount spent on fumigation in 2024 less than 1 million naira. You can find details on page 7, and that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
All right, let's take a look at the Vanguard newspaper. CBN fines 9 banks for failing to dispense cash at ATMs. And the big story, underfunding, huge debts, root causes of power sector failure. Underfunding, huge debts, and root cause of the power sector failure. Now, the writer following that says, as supply falls below 4,000 megawatts, and then we see create more hurdles for households and businesses. NERC orders Fidelity Bank to divest, and then we have power sector outlook gloomy coming from CPPE. Power Consumer Assistance Fund is key, coming from the Power Up Nigeria. And we will recall, casting our mind back to the paper we looked at on Monday when the Ministry of Power was defending his own budget, and he was complaining about underfunding, complaining about insecurity, and then as well here we're seeing that even he complained about even some of the infrastructures were being very old. Some of them as old as 50 to 60 years, and there is a need for new equipment, new infrastructure to be able to house all of these things. So here we're seeing that our supply has fallen below 4,000 megawatts. So there is a need to look into the funding that power we get. So it seems as if almost every ministry is complaining about underfunding when it comes to what they will be needing. So I hope the House will actually take all of this into cognizance and see what they can do. More detail regarding the story can be found on page 14. Still on Vanguard newspaper regarding AI, decentralized electricity supply coming for Konjo weather, still emphasizing what the Power Ministry have said, whereby states, community, local government should look into creating their own source of power. Now here, the writer says Nigeria can't be left behind. So this is a homework for every state to look into what they can do to also create their own, so that we don't all rely on the national grid that we have, no one that keeps collapsing. Still on Vanguard newspaper, GAC meets endorses new Lagos speaker, Merinda. You can read more detail of that on page 10. Marketers shift to Dangote refinery as petrol depot price hits 950 naira to a liter, and this happened on Monday. And then on sport, we have missing 2026 World Cup will be disaster for Nigeria. This is coming from Pinnick. You can read detail of that on page 38. And we have two picture stories. Tinubu congratulating awardee in the UAE. And then we have Okonjo Weather. UBA boss get honorary doctorates. You can do well read detail of other stories, and that's all of Vanguard newspaper.
On Leadership newspaper, the first story, Governor Yusuf Ashamale excited over leadership awards. Trending, court falls detention of Naomi and co-defendant. On numbers, US, Nigeria signed 2,095,000 grant for fiber optic. You can find both trend and numbers on page 2. First Bank releases a statement. This is concerning the GHL and the conflict back and forth. You can start with the details on the front page and continue on page 7. We will prioritize tax reform bills in 2025, Speaker Abbas is saying. 61 years of decon, Nigeria still imports military hardware and kits. To spend 41 billion naira on arms, others in 2024, we exported ammunition to African countries in 2024, corporation is saying. You are a cornerstone of national security, Tinubu tells armed forces. CBN sanctions 9 banks for failing to dispense cash via ATMs. 390 stranded Nigerians arrive from Niger. Wiki signs 5,481 CFO in 1 year. You can find details on page 16. Federal government targets 18 banks, over 200 billion USSD debt. You can find details on page 7, and that's all the news on Leadership newspaper.
All right, we'd love to take a time out at this moment, let you go through the stories. What do you feel about the various ministries during the defense of their project? We're seeing their budget actually, where we're also seeing the National Assembly, trying to give their take, where we're seeing that even the Ministry of Livestock have been warned not to channel all of his energy just to cattle alone. There are other things that need to be done regarding even the fight regarding herders and farmers clash. And then as well, we're seeing that the issue regarding power and many other stories as well. So we'd love to hear your own take on them. Please do well to drop them. And when we come back, we will continue with the paper review. Please stay tuned with us. Thanks for staying tuned. It's still the dailies. We have been looking at a number of stories that are making it round on our papers, among which we're looking at the defending of the budget coming in by various ministries, as well as certain agencies that might be merged or actually scrapped because of the way they did not bring in the expected allocation for their remitting money to the account of the federation, as well as we're also looking at what security will be, the funding, whether it is underfunded or it's actually getting the required funding. We'd love to hear your own take regarding that. So please do well to drop your comment. I still have Rachel with me. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Celia.
All right, let's take a look at the Blueprint newspaper. Appropriation Tax Reform Bill Reps Priority in 2025, coming from the Rep Speaker Abbas. CBN sanctioned 9 banks for failing to dispense cash via ATM. On sport, CAF postponed CHAN 2024 to August. You can find that on page 32. Ex-CDS Irabo at Armed Forces Day. War veterans protest over entitlement mustn't be allowed to feaster. Urges tax rebate post-traumatic stress disorder facility for retirees. And I think it's very important because some of them are still traumatized because they have been in the war front for quite a number of time. It's very difficult for them to to be able to cope with their daily life. So it's very important, and I think this is one of the suggestions being given by the former Chief of Defense Staff, Irabo. You can do out read more detail of what he said and more on the front page as well as on page 8. How Lukurawa terrorists try bribing police detective with 1.6 million naira. This happened in Kepi. On 2025 budget for Information Ministry grossly inadequate, coming from the Senate, where the National Assembly proposes 12 trillion naira revenue for custom, 180 billion naira for the NDIC. You can read more detail of that story in the paper. Nigerians international trade hits 197 trillion, 179.3% rise. And we have 9 royal families for the Allied Affairs nomination. And then why Niger Delta won't join proposed Biafra nation. You can do well to read more detail of that, and that's all on the Blueprint newspaper.
On New Nigerian, again, Boko Haram sacks Chibok community, raises church and residential houses. Federal government taking bold steps in tackling spread of homosexuality, lesbianism. This is a finding, and you can find details on page 3. The big story on the paper: synergy among ethnic nationalities will uplift Nigeria. Afenifere insists. The writer says it's ready to work with Ohanese or the ethnic nationalities for betterment of Nigeria. Congratulate Ohanese Indibo, its new president. You can continue with this story on page 5. Ensure release of 394 slain thief farmers' corpses, traditional rulers tax federal government, Nasarawa and Benue government. Group expresses worries over federal government's failure to release funds for 2024 capital budget. On insurgency, Yobe government to host 5th Lake Chad Governors Forum. Details can be found on page 2. Court orders substituted service on ex-PAP boss Major General Idiomu over 300 million naira unlawful detention of blogger. Nigerian Railway honors employee for returning $700 to passenger. Sun begs federal government to immortalize late finance minister Festus Okoti-Ebo. You can find details on page 2. In Kano, there's a state of emergency in education. Governor Yusuf distributes uniform to 789,000 pupils. Child Protection Services, Kaduna Ministry seeks platform for documentation of progress. Save the Children explains new project reaching out of school children. All details can be found on page 6, and that's all the news on New Nigerian.
On this Nigeria, we have NERC transfer full regulatory function to 4 states. More detail of that can be found on page 12. On insecurity, banditry will end in 2 months with adequate funding, Minister tells reps. The writer says Matawali says 50 billion naira allocated to Defense Ministry for 2025 too small, where we're seeing that about 41 billion naira will be used to acquire just equipment, so you could wonder they will be left with little or nothing to actually cater for other things that are needed in the talking about security and all of that. Seek more armored personnel carriers, and then reps promise to increase the budget. So we look forward to seeing what the new budget will be. Wiki signed 5,481 C of O in 16 months. Aduda Laos Minister on FCT infrastructure development. More detail on page 7. On food security, federal government takes delivery of 255 tractors to be distributed to farmers, and we hope to see more tractors because we need to look into the new money-making way, and that is through agriculture. We have the picture story. You can do well to get the paper, read that, and that's all on this Nigerian newspaper.
On Punch Sport Extra, the big story: fresh blood. Nigerian born stars who could boost Cherries Eagles. You can find details on page 6. Ghana's sport clash in North London rivalry. We have Okuchukwu joins Ashola and others in NWSL. Boniface nears Leverkusen return. All eyes on new signings as NWFL begins. 300,000 euros cost may rule Sadiq out against Sociedad. Jesus out for season with ACL rupture. Milan prioritized Rashford over Walker. Liverpool rejects £70 million Nunes offer. You can find details on page 4. On cricket, Nigeria ready for Under-19 World Cup after Scotland test. Fury tipped to snub retirement for Joshua. You can find details on page 2. And that's all the news on Punch Sport Extra.
Well, Shadi said it yesterday. It seems as if the moment he's been provoked, Fury will say, okay, I'm not really retired. I'll be back. Well, we wish him all the best. Let's take a look at Business Day newspaper. Food deregulation spark petrol price war. You can start reading that story on the front page and continue a similar story on page 30. Naira fall takes $310 billion toll on economy. Bitcoin, dollar asset top investment watch. It's the new year and investors are evaluating various asset classes with the hope of selecting the most profitable investment opportunities in 2025. Now we're seeing that in 2024, the naira depreciation against the dollar fell significant return for those holding dollar saving. And so you have to look at what the Nigerian stock market will be looking like. So all fingers crossed on page 31. Second phase of SEME project to commence in the first quarter, coming from Adedibu, that's the power minister, the minister. So you can do well to look into that on page 29. And that's all on Business Day newspaper as well as how far we can go on the program this morning. Thank you, Rachel, for doing this.
You're welcome, Sele.
Thank you as well to all our viewers and the production crew for making the program a success. Till we come tomorrow, please do have a lovely day ahead.